Welcome to Trending Unpacked, the podcast where we make sense of the stories everyone's talking about. Today, we're stepping into a world that, it just screams raw power, doesn't it? Brutal fights, yes, but also the profound, often really hidden struggles of a human being. It's a story encapsulated by this legendary, almost mythical nickname, the Smashing Machine.
The Smashing Machine. Yeah, it's one of those names, isn't it? Even years later, it still conjures these visions of just unbridled, almost terrifying force. At his peak, I mean, this fighter truly seemed like an unstoppable force of nature, a real juggernaut in the very nascent, very wild world of mixed martial arts back then.
And the man behind that really fearsome title is Kerr. Now, for anyone who followed the early, the formative years of MMA, his name isn't just some footnote. It practically defines an era, right? A specific kind of intensity that really shaped the sport. And now, almost 2 decades after his most intimate struggles were kind of laid bare in that iconic documentary, Kerr's incredible, tumultuous journey is being brought back into the spotlight. Bigger than ever before, it seems.
Yeah, and it's not just a quiet resurfacing either, not at all. We're talking about a full-blown Hollywood reintroduction. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, himself this global icon whose very presence commands attention, has officially announced that his highly anticipated biopic about Kerr's life is actually in production, set for 2025. So this isn't just another sports story we're looking at. It feels more like a cultural event, really, poised to re-examine a very complex legacy.
Which raises a really fascinating question for us and for you listening. Why Kerr's story? I mean, it's a tale rooted in the very dawn of MMA. Why is it suddenly trending with such incredible force right now? What makes this narrative so compelling, so resonant for us today in a world that feels, so far removed from those truly Wild West days of the octagon? We're going to scrutinize the man, the machine, the myths that sort of grew up around him, and the modern interpretations that are making his legacy reverberate once again across sports, culture, entertainment.
It's definitely a captivating blend. You've got sports history, deeply personal drama, and, well, the intricate art of Hollywood's narrative crafting all mixed together. The timing of this resurgence, I think, it offers us this unique lens, really, through which to examine our current cultural fascinations and maybe even our anxieties.
Okay, let's start by trying to understand the man himself then. Kerr, the man, the machine. Born in 1968, American, retired mixed martial artist, world-class wrestler, veiled Tudo fighter. But that straightforward description, it barely begins to capture the sheer depth of his athletic pedigree, does it? Or the foundation upon which that whole reputation was built. Before he ever even thought about stepping into a cage, Kerr was, an absolute phenomenon on the wrestling mat.
Oh, absolutely. And what's really crucial to understand here, I think, is that his combat sports career wasn't just built on, raw aggression or brute strength, though he certainly had plenty of both. It was fundamentally rooted in an extraordinarily decorated amateur wrestling background. We're talking multiple NCAA Division I titles. That's the undisputed pinnacle of collegiate wrestling in the United States. And for anyone who understands that sport, this signifies not just immense natural talent, but years of just brutal, unforgiving training, strategic mastery too, and a relentless, almost obsessive pursuit of excellence. It set him apart from nearly all his peers, long before MMA even really entered the mainstream consciousness.
So way beyond just being physically gifted.
Exactly. And he also secured wins in highly competitive international tournaments. That solidified his standing not just as the best in the country, but as genuinely one of the world's finest grapplers. This wasn't just physical prowess, it was a testament to his intellectual approach to combat, you could say.
That foundation then, that absolute mastery of wrestling, it must have been an almost unfair advantage when he transitioned into the nascent, kind of chaotic world of MMA in the late 1990s. He wasn't just tough, he was technically miles ahead in an era where many fighters were still, let's be honest, glorified brawlers or maybe one-dimensional specialists. This wrestling prowess, it had to be the engine behind his truly meteoric rise. And that nickname, the Smashing Machine, it wasn't just some marketing gimmick, was it? It perfectly captured his devastating style.
It was incredibly apt, yeah. It embodied the terrifying reality of actually facing him in the ring or cage. The Smashing Machine described a fighter whose approach was just utterly dominant, almost suffocating in its relentless nature. He used overwhelming grappling, which, for those maybe unfamiliar, is the art of controlling an opponent on the ground through takedowns, holds, positional advantage. He'd often take opponents down with surprising speed and power, and then just relentlessly smash them with strikes from top control. This dominant position where he could rain down punches and elbows with devastating effect, often without much retaliation. It was pretty revolutionary at the time.
So different from just going for a quick submission hold.
Very different. Unlike many early fighters who might look for a quick tap out with a joint lock or a choke, Kerr's primary goal seemed to be imposing his will. systematically breaking his opponents, physically and mentally, through sheer, brutal pressure. It was a grind, a methodical destruction. And that was groundbreaking for an era where many fighters still favored striking exclusively or were maybe just learning grappling on the fly. This made Kerr a truly formidable, almost terrifying opponent. Because once he got you down, escape was, well, rarely an option.
And he proved this in major tournaments, right? You mentioned his achievements, winning multiple UFC tournaments. And these weren't just any tournaments, were they? This was the early UFC, a truly different beast than the meticulously regulated multi-event structure we see today.
Oh, completely different. These were often single-night events. Fighters were expected to compete and win multiple grueling fights, all in one evening. Can you imagine the physical and mental toll? Not just winning, but dominating multiple high-level opponents in a matter of hours. It was a true test of endurance, skill, and just sheer, raw grit, pushing the human body to its absolute limits.
Just surviving sounds incredible, let alone winning multiple times.
Exactly. These were brutal, unforgiving proving grounds, really designed to find the truly toughest, most well-rounded fighters.
Yeah.
And Kerr didn't just survive, he absolutely thrived in them, winning multiple UFC tournaments. But his dominance wasn't confined to American shores either. He successfully transitioned to Japan's prestigious Pride Fighting Championships, which, at the time, was arguably the biggest and most spectacular stage in the world for mixed martial arts.
Pride had that huge aura around it, didn't it?
It really did. Competing and succeeding in Pride solidified his reputation as one of the sport's true heavyweights, a legitimate global threat. If you wanted to see the absolute pinnacle of high-stakes combat back then, you watched Pride. And Kerr was consistently a headliner, facing some of the most fearsome fighters on the planet. He wasn't just winning, he was a spectacle. People tuned in to see the smashing machine.
So from this perspective, we have this vivid image of an almost invincible warrior, right? A decorated wrestling prodigy turned MMA phenom, the smashing machine, who dominated two of the biggest stages in combat sports, seemingly impervious to pain or weakness. But here's where the narrative takes that dramatic and profoundly human turn. Because beneath that formidable, almost indestructible exterior, Mark Kerr was fighting battles that were far more insidious, far more destructive than anything he ever faced inside the cage.
And this is truly the crucial pivot in his story, isn't it? A heartbreaking dichotomy. The professional triumphs, the seemingly unstoppable force he projected, it began to contrast so sharply with severe personal struggles. Struggles that slowly, insidiously began to chip away at everything he had built. We're talking about profound challenges, devastating addiction to painkillers, chronic injuries that relentlessly gnawed at his physical capabilities and his mental fortitude, and deeply complex personal battles that were taking just an immense toll on his mental and emotional well-being.
So the man who appeared invincible.
Exactly. The titan of combat sports in the ring was, outside of it, shockingly vulnerable, battling these profound internal demons that threatened to consume him entirely.
And what truly brought these unseen battles to light, cementing them as an undeniable, really indelible part of his public legacy, was an unflinching, remarkably honest documentary. In 2002, HBO released The Smashing Machine, a film that didn't just celebrate his cage victories, it exposed his struggles with a raw, almost uncomfortable honesty, which was virtually unheard of at the time for a prominent athlete, right?
Yeah.
Especially one still active in a high-profile sport.
Absolutely. That documentary became an absolutely pivotal piece of his narrative, and I think it resonated so deeply precisely because of its brutal authenticity. It was not some carefully curated PR piece designed to burnish an image, not at all. It was a deeply intimate, often voyeuristic, and sometimes genuinely uncomfortable look at his life. The film unflinchingly showed both his incredible success in the cage. You saw the sheer power and precision of the smashing machine. But crucially, and perhaps more impactfully, it also laid bare his escalating battles with drugs. His moments of despair, the complexities and strains of his personal relationships, it was all there.
It offered this rare, unfiltered, and deeply human look at the often unseen dark side of athletic glory.
Exactly. It revealed the profound human frailty that existed not just alongside, but often within his extraordinary athletic power. And it was an incredibly important moment because, it predated the current era of athlete vulnerability narratives by quite a significant margin. It demonstrated that long before anyone was even considering a Hollywood biopic, the true, messy, struggling Mark Kerr was already on display for those willing to confront that difficult reality. It really forced audiences to consider the true cost of such extreme physical and mental demands.
It's such a remarkable piece of filmmaking because it forces you to confront the visceral cost of that kind of greatness. You see the dizzying highs, the sheer exhilaration of victory, but then you also see the crushing lows. The physical pain that never truly seems to subside, the mental anguish of addiction, and the terrifying grip it held over his life. Watching it, you almost feel the immense weight of his world, the immense pressure he was under. It's hard to watch at times, genuinely raw, but impossible to look away. That's a testament to its power, I think. What do you think was the most profound, maybe even uncomfortable revelation that film offered about the true cost of being the smashing machine?
That's a tough question. For me, the most uncomfortable revelation was how starkly it illustrated the lack of infrastructure for athlete support in that era. That really stood out. It wasn't just about his personal choices, you see. It showed a system that glorified the warrior, the machine, then kind of left him to deal with the fallout, the human wreckage, alone. The film made it painfully clear that his physical and mental health were often secondary to his performance, and that addiction, in many cases, became a coping mechanism for the relentless demands and, crucially, the severe injuries sustained in such a brutal sport without adequate care or recovery time. So it wasn't just a story about one man's struggle. It felt like an indictment of the environment that shaped him and maybe even enabled some of that struggle.
That's a powerful way to frame it, an indictment of the environment. Now, with The Rock's announcement, his story isn't just back in the headlines. It's become this lightning rod for broader conversations, hasn't it? Sparking a fascinating array of internet theories and cultural interpretations. What do these evolving perspectives tell us about how we view heroes, especially those who've stumbled?
Oh, they reveal a tremendous amount, I think, about our collective consciousness, about how different segments of our society view both the sport of MMA itself and, well, the broader concept of a hero's journey in the public eye.
Okay, let's start with the MMA fan perspective, particularly those who followed the sport from its very inception, right? For them, Kerr is more than just a fighter. He's almost a living, breathing relic of that Wild West era of early mixed martial arts. He was a pioneer in every sense of the word. And his struggles, for many of these longtime fans, they aren't just personal misfortunes, but a stark reflection of the systemic issues prevalent during that chaotic period.
Precisely. These fans, the ones who witnessed the sport, evolve from its raw, often unregulated beginnings. They often reminisce about an era that was largely devoid of the sophisticated oversight we see today. I mean, just consider, for a moment, the medical infrastructure, or really the severe lack thereof. Fighters frequently competed with, undiagnosed concussions, untreated injuries, all without the comprehensive pre-fight screenings that are standard practice now. Weight cut practices were often rudimentary, sometimes dangerously unregulated, pushing athletes to extreme levels of dehydration without proper rehydration protocols being understood or enforced.
Just brutal conditions compared to today.
Exactly. There was a significant, almost callous lack of concern for fighter health and long-term well-being compared to today's more structured environment, where, athletic commissions mandate extensive testing and sports science plays a crucial role in recovery and performance. So Kerr's chronic injuries, his reliance on painkillers, these weren't just personal afflictions. They were often direct consequences of a system that demanded extreme physical performance without providing anything close to extreme care. He becomes this tragic symbol of this era, doesn't he? A poignant reminder of the heavy toll the sport could exact on its participants when it was still finding its feet, often treating its athletes more like disposable gladiators rather than, say, long-term investments.
That makes sense. So the biopic announcement for these fans, it isn't just about celebrating Mark Kerr.
No, it sparks broader, often quite heated conversations about how much the sport has truly changed in its treatment of fighters. Or hasn't, in some eyes. Especially concerning things like long-term brain health, mental health support, post-career welfare. These are big topics. They're debating whether the glamour of a Hollywood film might overshadow these deeper systemic critiques, Will it just focus on the individual struggle and ignore the context?
It's a valid and really important point to make. You do hear fans recount those tales of fighters entering the cage after brutal cuts, pushing through injuries, all without the sophisticated sports medicine and psychological support systems we'd expect today. Kerr's story becomes a touchstone, a grim reminder of that entire brutal bygone era. But then you shift to the Hollywood angle and suddenly we're looking through a completely different lens, aren't we? Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's involvement isn't just about massive star power, it's a narrative framing device in itself. It shapes how this story will likely be told.
Oh, absolutely. This is where the story gets recontextualized, potentially reshaped for a mass global audience. The Rock, with his universally recognized larger-than-life persona, his incredibly positive and, aspirational public image, and his penchant for feel-good, action-packed roles where heroes inevitably triumph. He's almost guaranteed to transform Kerr's complex, often dark and gritty story into something far more accessible, perhaps even, uplifting. It's likely to become a classic Hollywood redemption arc, really. Tailor-made for broad appeal, the painful nuances of addiction, the slow, agonizing burn of recovery, the sheer, messy unpredictability of real life, these raw elements might very well be streamlined, maybe even sanitized a bit for a broader audience, with the focus shifting heavily towards the eventual triumph over adversity rather than the agonizing, imperfect journey through it.
So it's not just about telling Mark Kerr's story, but about telling it through The Rock's particular storytelling lens, almost like a brand filter. And that has significant implications for Kerr's legacy, doesn't it? Will Hollywood inadvertently simplify the true, messy nuances of addiction and recovery? Will the raw, unpolished, often brutal violence of early MMA be softened, say, for a PG-13 audience, losing some of its authentic edge?
This is indeed the core tension here, yeah. And it's a debate that flares up with almost every biopic based on a complex, true story, right? Hollywood has this well-established, almost insatiable fascination with broken heroes and their journey back from the brink. It's a narrative archetype that consistently draws massive audiences because it's inherently aspirational, deeply emotional, and it offers a powerful sense of hope. The Rock's version will undoubtedly tap into that universal appeal, focusing on the potential for overcoming one's demons, for finding that second chance, even if it means adjusting the historical fidelity somewhat to craft a more commercially viable and, well, uplifting story. It's maybe about inspiring a new generation, perhaps, rather than strictly documenting every painful, unvarnished detail of his reality. The artistic license taken to distill a life into a 2-hour film will inevitably reshape perception, won't it?
It almost always does, and that ties directly into a broader cultural interpretation. Why do we, as a society, gravitate toward these particular stories in the first place? Mark Kerr, in so many ways, he fits that archetype of the fallen hero.
Yeah.
He was once this almost invincible figure, at the pinnacle of physical prowess, and that makes his very public confrontation with profound human flaws all the more captivating.
It absolutely does. We as a society seem inherently drawn to narratives where powerful, seemingly unstoppable figures are brought low, or where they wrestle with deeply relatable human vulnerabilities. When you witness someone who achieves such physical dominance, only to be brought low by internal struggles, whether it's addiction, mental health issues, or other personal demons, it humanizes them in a really profound way. And paradoxically, this vulnerability often makes them even more legendary, doesn't it? Because their story then encompasses the full, complex spectrum of the human experience, the dizzying peak of physical prowess and the crushing depths of personal despair. This narrative taps into these universal themes of hubris, the pride that comes before a fall, the inevitable downfall that can sometimes follow immense success, and crucially, the enduring human quest for a second chance, for redemption. It's kind of a reflection of our own hopes and fears, our own internal battles projected onto a larger-than-life figure. We connect with the idea that even the strongest among us can stumble, but also that real strength is found in the struggle to rise again.
That's a powerful observation. It's almost like we need to see our heroes stumble to truly understand their humanity, maybe, to find a piece of ourselves in their struggles. But of course, with any major biopic announcement, especially one involving a figure as complex and frankly controversial as Kerr, there are already vibrant online debates, concerns about authenticity. You can practically hear the keyboard warriors across the internet firing up their arguments right now.
Indeed. The online sphere, particularly among dedicated MMA fans, film critics, and those who really cherish historical accuracy, is already buzzing, with two distinct, often clashing camps. On one side, you have the skeptics. These individuals are wary, arguing that Hollywood, with its well-known tendency to dramatize, simplify, and sometimes sensationalize for effect, might over-dramatize Kerr's struggles. They worry about the potential for sensationalizing his pain just for cinematic impact. Or, maybe on the flip side, sanitizing the raw grittiness and visceral brutality of early MMA to make it palatable for a wider, potentially more sensitive audience. Their concern stems from a fear of a loss of authenticity, right? Of the film becoming a Hollywoodized version of the truth rather than the raw, uncomfortable reality depicted in the HBO documentary. They remember the blood, the sweat, the profound despair, and they question if a blockbuster can truly capture that essence.
They're concerned that the raw, uncomfortable, almost documentary truth of the HBO film might be polished into something too palatable, losing the very edge and integrity that made Kerr's story so impactful in the first place, stripping it of its hard-earned lessons. But then there's the other side, the optimists, who see immense potential here.
Yes, and these optimists feel that the biopic, precisely because of its immense scale and the star power of Dwayne Johnson, will finally give Mark Kerr the widespread recognition and maybe the profound understanding he truly deserves. They see it as an unparalleled opportunity to introduce his incredibly compelling story, with all its dizzying highs and devastating lows, to a massive new generation. People who might not know of the Smashing Machine or the truly wild early days of MMA. They believe that even with Hollywood's inevitable narrative adjustments, the core message of resilience, the human cost of extreme athleticism, and the possibility of redemption will resonate powerfully. This whole debate really highlights the inherent tension, doesn't it, between historical accuracy and cinematic interpretation. It's the eternal challenge of adapting a complex, true story for the emotional demands of the big screen. It's about impact versus fidelity, perhaps. And for some, impact in this case means getting Kerr's story to as many people as possible.
It's a fascinating balancing act for sure. How do you honor the truth while crafting a story that reaches millions and resonates emotionally? This brings us, I think, to the core of our discussion. What does Mark Kerr's resurgence in public attention and the creation of this high-profile biopic truly mean for today's culture? What's the analysis here, and what's the most impactful takeaway we can derive from this? For me, it seems to circle back to the enduring, almost universal power of resilience and the profound hope embedded in the idea of second chances.
Absolutely, I think that's central. In any era, stories of resilience, of these broken heroes fighting their way back from the brink, of confronting deeply personal demons, and the powerful, almost spiritual promise of second chances, they resonate profoundly with audiences. In our current world, which often feels saturated with overwhelming information, complex societal challenges, and this constant, almost desperate search for inspiration and hope, Kerr's journey offers something compelling. From absolute dominance to profound despair and the cinematic possibility of a comeback. It's a deeply powerful narrative structure. But I think it's important to note, this isn't just a generic tale of overcoming. Kerr's story, particularly when you juxtapose it with the raw HBO documentary, offers a stark mirror to our modern fascination with, say, wellness culture and carefully curated comeback narratives, compared to the brutal, messy reality of a pre-wellness athletic era.
That's a really interesting distinction, the contrast between the polished comeback and the raw reality.
Exactly. It forces us to ask, at what cost do we celebrate physical prowess? And how much responsibility do we truly take for the brokenness it can sometimes leave behind? The Rock's potentially polished version might offer a comforting narrative of hope, and that has value. But the original HBO documentary serves as a vital reminder that true resilience often isn't pretty. It's a messy, ongoing, deeply personal battle that continues long after the cameras stop rolling. A stark contrast to the perfectly packaged comeback stories we often consume today. So the narrative becomes less about the physical fights he won or lost in the cage, and far more about the internal struggle, against his own demons, against a system that maybe didn't fully protect its gladiators. And that's a fight everyone can relate to on some level, isn't it? A profound human drama that transcends the sport itself.
That distinction is crucial. It's about the universal human condition, right? The profound ability to fall, to be broken, and yet still possess that inner fire to attempt to get back up, even when it feels utterly impossible. And Kerr's story also allows us to connect his individual journey to much broader cultural themes viewed through the unique and often brutal lens of combat sports.
That's a critical connection to make, definitely. Sports like MMA, with their raw physicality, their high stakes, and their very explicit displays of human triumph and failure, they often serve as an incredibly potent mirror to society's deepest fascinations and anxieties. They reflect our collective obsession with both extreme glory, the absolute peak of human achievement and physical perfection, and the devastating, often very public downfall that can accompany it. The arena, whether it was the UFC Octagon or that massive Pride ring in Japan, effectively becomes this highly dramatic stage for primal human dramas. We see the relentless pursuit of excellence, the incredible, almost fragile vulnerability of the human body under immense pressure. We see the indomitable power of the human spirit to endure pain beyond imagination. And crucially, the often unseen consequences of excess, addiction, or pushing human limits without adequate support or maybe ethical oversight. It's a grand public display of our own internal conflicts in a way.
So Mark Kerr's journey isn't just his own personal saga. It encapsulates this duality for all of us watching. He shows us the ultimate highs, the smashing machine at his unstoppable, terrifying best, and the crushing lows, the raw, vulnerable man battling addiction, injuries, and the profound personal cost of that relentless pursuit of greatness. It's an uncomfortable mirror sometimes, but a necessary one.
Precisely. His story invites us, really, to consider what this tells us about our own societal obsessions. With strength, yes, but also with vulnerability. Why are we so profoundly drawn to these extremes? What does it say about our collective search for meaning and struggle and our perpetual hope for redemption, for that second act? His journey becomes this canvas onto which we project our own understanding of ambition, of the fragility of success, of failure, and the perpetual human desire for a chance to rewrite our story. It's a powerful reflection, I think, of what it means to push the absolute boundaries of human experience, both physically and emotionally, and the profound lessons we can maybe glean from those who dared to live right at the very edge.
And that, I believe, is why Mark Kerr's story continues to captivate us decades later with the same kind of intensity as his fights once did. It's a testament, really, to the fact that true sports legends transcend mere athletic achievement. Their stories, with all their triumphs and their profound tragedies, they evolve, don't they, into these cultural myths that teach us fundamental truths about human nature, about resilience in the face of what seems like insurmountable odds, and about our relentless, often painful search for meaning in a complex world.
A truly enduring and deeply human narrative. Couldn't agree more.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration. And speaking of public figures who dominate headlines, next time we unpack Donald Trump, why he continues to be one of the most polarizing figures in modern history.